But some of y'all are doing too much, posting fake and dumb crap just to get attention and farm ad revenue. Take a beat to get the facts before you grift for the sake of.
Okay, all right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of A Fresh Perspective with Jeff Charles, where we prefer truth over narrative and principles over politics. And I'm just going to dive right on into this. So you probably already heard the clip, right? Right? That started this whole thing. That's what I'm going to be talking about. So today I want to dive into a topic that has a lot of people on the right and on the left freaking out. And it is something known as diversity, equity, and inclusion, better known as DEI, which has become this big boogeyman, depending on where you stand the whole thing, or a way to ensure equity, depending on where you stand again. So I've been posting a lot about this on social media. I've written a bunch of articles on this topic as well. But I'm going to focus on how the right has been reacting to DEI and how it's been using it. And my opinion so far is in the minority among people on the right. So you've probably already seen this online. Every time something bad happens, you have right-wing influencers coming out and blaming DEI. Now, we do know that the DEI or that the left became obsessed with DEI after the whole George Floyd thing. And that's kind of what I'm going to be playing a clip of Tommy Loren discussing this. The left got drunk with DEI in 2020 after George Floyd happened. And then it started being seen as this cure-all for racism. Now, here's the thing. A lot of companies started having DEI departments and hiring people to promote DEI. Most of these people were white, by the way. I think only 4% of these people were black or a racial minority. Most of these people were white women who were promoting DEI and saying, oh, we're going to be more diverse in our hiring standards, blah, blah, blah. Which, by the way, DEI, the common misconception is that DEI was made to benefit black people. Nope. It was made to help white women. Now that's a whole other discussion, and I'll talk just a tiny bit about this later in this segment here. But the bottom line is that this whole obsession with DEI, it's infiltrated our government, federal agencies, the military, corporate America, entertainment, and it is part of an ideology, a hard leftist ideology. They have basically taken what we used to just be called diversity and maybe inclusion too, which I think had noble intentions. Like you do want to give people from diverse backgrounds a fair shot. You want to give qualified people from diverse backgrounds a fair shot at whatever we're talking about here, whether it's in a company or at a university or what have you. It was made to counteract the notion that a black person or a Hispanic or a woman or a member of the LGBTQ community wouldn't be able to have as much of a shot at getting promotions or getting hired as a straight white male. Okay, fine. I mean, this goes back before DI was even a thing. You had affirmative action, and that's a whole other debate, and that's worth having a discussion about. But what I want to talk about here is how the right is reacting to DEI. Now, some of you are going to be tempted to say, well, why are you defending DEI? Why are you defending it? Not defending it. And if you stay tuned to this whole thing that I'm doing right now, you'll see what is the actual problem with DEI, especially in how it's being used. But we'll get there in a second. First, I want to talk about how the right reacts. Now, it's like every time something bad happens, like the California wildfires or the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge, or if somebody stubs their toe, it is because of DEI. Automatically, people jump to that conclusion, especially on the right, with no evidence, and they argue that it's because DEI means that women and racial minorities and members of the LGBTQ community are being hired for positions for which they are not qualified, which is kind of weird that people would automatically assume that, given that the right prides itself on going with facts and logic. But I'm going to play this clip from Tommy Loren. She did this monologue the other day, and I thought it was spot on. And we need more people on the right in positions like hers saying these types of things, because if we're going to deal with DEI, we have to deal with the actual problem and not just some boogeyman that people made up to get clout, clicks, and cash. So I'm going to go ahead and hit that
The
and hit
left
this.
got DEI drunk in 2020. There's no doubt about it. Somehow, after the death of George Floyd, the sudden cure-all for racism became open and blatant discrimination against white people, and especially white men. Shocker, that didn't cure racism, it just rebranded it. Skin color, pronouns, and the oppression totem pole became the new bar for hiring, firing, and everything else. It was stupid then, and it's still stupid now. However, what I'm about to say might piss off some of my fellow conservatives, but I do not care. The right now also runs the risk of overplaying our hands when it comes to DEI, or rather the absolute obsession with it. This became abundantly obvious to me in the aftermath of the horrific and tragic Black Hawk and plane collision over the Potomac. Dozens of people are dead. We need to know what caused the horrible error to occur and make sure it doesn't happen again. However, the number of folks, particularly on X, who immediately started to proclaim it had to be DEI, that was too much. And then with zero facts or evidence started putting out there that one of the Black Hawk pilots was trans, to the extent that the actual trans person they tried to blame it on had to come out and make a video about it. Come on, y'all. What the hell? X is great, but some of y'all are doing too much, posting fake and dumb crap just to get attention and farm ad revenue. Take a beat to get the facts before you grift for the sake of the grift. And to make matters worse, when the actual female Black Hawk pilot's name was released, some of these same folks immediately proclaimed the crash had to be her fault because she was a woman. Really, if this is the social media right, I do not want to be a part of it. Eliminating DEI is not about eliminating diversity. It's about prioritizing competency over diversity. But it feels like some who proclaim to be conservative have twisted that notion and are now just looking to blame anything and everything on diversity. And I'll tell you what, it doesn't help the cause at all. It's actually a giant distraction from the cause and will alienate folks that we just added to the tent. All this to say, we can return our government and the private sector back to merit over identity. We don't have to be a-holes about it in the process.
Okay, so you heard that, right? Now, Tommy Loren is not wrong. She nailed it. And it seems like more of these influencers are starting to finally realize that DEI doesn't really equate to black. It's more about white women. But there's still a lot of people who will pretend like this is more about skin color than anything else, or at least minority skin color, I should say, because it ain't black or Hispanic women that are really benefiting from this either. So here's the thing. The problem is that you have conservatives, libertarian, folks who are generally on the right, especially right-wing influencers on the airwaves and the interwebs, treating DEI in the same way that the hard left treats the word racism. It's a convenient label that you can apply to anything that goes wrong or anything that you don't like. So we had that helicopter collision a couple weeks ago, right, where the airliner crashed into a Black Hawk helicopter near Washington, D.C. And it was like 5 seconds after that story broke, and people were already saying, "Oh, that must have been because of DEI." They had no idea who the pilots were. They had no idea who was in the air traffic control towers at that moment. They have no idea what happened, but they know for a fact it was DEI, of course. Now, here's the thing. It's not just that. I mean, I mentioned the Francis Scott Key Bridge that collapsed in Baltimore. People rushed to say that that was a result of DEI. Again, 5 seconds after the news broke about it. And it's funny because you don't really hear people mention that anymore as far as DEI goes, because DEI had absolutely nothing to do with it. And here's the thing. I mean, they even called the mayor of Baltimore, because he's black, a DEI mayor. First off, if somebody is voted into office, it's not DEI. That's called an election, you weirdos. So there was that. And we can just go down the line. And even before that, you had right-wing influencers talking about how, black pilots aren't qualified, black doctors aren't qualified. Oh, if I see a black doctor, I'm going to be worried about my health because I don't know if he actually made it to where he was based on merit. He probably made it there just because he was picked because he's black. It's like these people think that somebody like me can just walk into an airline and say, hey, guess what? I'm black. Make me a pilot. And they're like, yes, go ahead and fly that plane. That's not what happens. Now, we can quibble and argue about the qualifications or the requirements that are in place for doctors, for pilots, or what have you. But as it stands now, everybody, regardless of whether DEI exists or not, has to meet the same standards in order to get in the cockpit or in order to wear the stethoscope or what have you. And the thing is, we on the right, we mock the left for their performative outrage and their hysteria, and again for their obsession with calling everybody racist. Now there's no leg to stand on, right? There is no moral equivalency here because people on the right are doing the exact same thing. Now we already know that the left uses racism as a political tactic. The hard left does not see racism as a societal ill that should be solved. They see it as a political cudgel that they can use against people they don't like. Folks on the right are doing that with DEI. Now, again, nobody's ever provided a shred of evidence that any of the disasters that I've spoken about are the result of people who are not qualified being put into these positions because of their skin tone, because of their ethnicity, sexual preference, or gender, or what have you. They haven't shown it. Now, could there be instances where somebody is hired just for one of those immutable characteristics and they're not qualified to perform the job? Yeah, of course it's possible. I will even say it's probably happened at some point or another. Just like straight white men have been hired for positions that they weren't qualified for, either because of nepotism or because the hiring managers didn't know what they were doing. There are all kinds of reasons why this happens. There has been no evidence that the quality of corporations, of corporate America, or anything else has gone down because they started getting a few more black people in there, or a few more women, or a few more whatever. There is none. I've asked for it. I've been asking for it multiple times. Nobody can provide that for me. You know what their argument is? You know what their proof is? Trust me, bro. It has to be happening because why did this plane crash? It's like they don't realize that plane crashes happened before DEI was a thing. And actually, I found out, at least when it comes to air travel. So in 2014, as far as air traffic controllers go, right? What they did is they revamped the qualifications and the testing, and they did put in DEI for that. Since 2014 and today, there have actually been fewer plane crashes. So either you got to argue that DEI was a good thing, or maybe DEI just doesn't have as much to do with it when it comes to hiring quality people. Now, I do have my criticisms with how the air traffic control system has been revamped and the way they went about it. It was wrong. And I did a whole long form post on X about that. I'll put that in the show notes under here so you guys don't know what I'm talking about. I don't have time to really dive deep into that. But here's the thing. DEI, we're attacking it the wrong way. That's what's happening here. And honestly, it's counterproductive because if you're saying that DEI is a problem and the reason that you give, you can't provide really any proof showing that it's causing these problems, then yeah, you're going to fool some people. You're going to fool people who already want to believe it in the first place. But to regular people who aren't in the right-wing echo chamber, we look crazy. We look stupid because it makes no sense. Now, don't get me wrong. There are problems with DEI. Now, in general, I don't have a problem with the D or the I. I have no problem with an organization saying we want a more diverse staff. We want to hire people from more diverse backgrounds, get some different perspectives in here, and have people get along and work together towards a common objective. I have no problem with that. The equity part I do have a problem with because we know that equity is not the same as equality. Equity is about guaranteeing an outcome rather than guaranteeing an opportunity. So that's one problem with it, but it even goes further than that. The thing is that attacking DEI because it supposedly means that unqualified people are just getting into positions they don't deserve willy-nilly, that's like being afraid of an alligator because it's green. No, the alligator isn't a problem because it's green. The alligator is a problem because it has long, sharp teeth. It has billions of teeth in that mouth, and they will kill you. That's what the problem is. They could be yellow and still do the exact same thing. I wonder if yellow alligators exist. I'll have to look that up. I'll let you guys know. I'll circle back with you on that. Anyway, here's what I see as the main problem with DEI, especially with how it's being implemented in a lot of companies, government institutions, in the world of academia, and anywhere else. There was a study, and I wrote about this for Wrong Speak. That is Adam Coleman's platform. Shout out to Adam Coleman. And it was a study from the Network Contagion Research Institute, NCRI. This study found that DEI narratives actually increase hostility and division. So, in the course of doing this study, they did an experiment. They did a few different experiments. I would encourage you to read the article and even read the study too. One of the experiments that people found that people who were exposed to DEI training, which happens in a lot of these institutions that I just mentioned, in a lot of these institutions, people who were exposed to DEI training were 21% more likely to see discrimination where none existed, 26% more likely to believe that harm was caused to an individual. They were 35% more likely to perceive microaggressions. They were also, just coincidentally, they were 12% more likely to support mandatory DEI training. So they did, like I said, they did a lot of different experiments where people were presented with different scenarios. And those who were not subjected to DEI training, which included the works of Robin DiAngelo, Ibram X. Kendi, and some of those other folks, those who were not exposed to that were less likely to see discrimination in these scenarios where it specifically did not exist. And those who were exposed to it saw it where it didn't exist. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? Right? It does sound familiar. It sounds kind of like people seeing DI where it doesn't exist, but I digress. Anyway, here's the thing. DI does not create unity. It does not promote unity. It actively makes people more sensitive to imagined offenses, and it fuels division. It pits us against one another, black against white, straight versus LGBTQ, men against women. The list goes on and on, right? That's the issue. And the way a lot of these trainings are being presented, you've probably seen videos of them on social media. I mean, a lot of right-wing influencers will share videos showing a lot how a lot of these DEI seminars and trainings go. There have been articles written on it where white people are basically told that they're hopelessly racist, blah, 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 blah. We already know the story. There's a lot of anti-white type of stuff in those trainings. I would also argue that they are also anti-black and anti-racial minority in the way they portray the dynamic here. We've had these conversations. DEI is what I just talked about on steroids, because DEI has become a weaponized ideology that again pits us against each other. I'm not saying this is the case in every single situation. There may be companies who do diversity and they do it right. They do it in a way that promotes understanding, that promotes cohesiveness, and it does not promote racial animus or any other type of animus or hatred. But in a lot of cases, it has been weaponized. And as the government gets bigger and corporations get richer, nobody is paying attention to who's really pulling the strings, because this ideology causes us to look at one another as the problem, right? And this is just one of many ways that the powers that be are trying to divide us. Or I'm not even going to say try, they've succeeded. I mean, and they are succeeding, I should say. This battle isn't, as I've been saying this for it feels like billions of years, the battle isn't about black versus white and men versus women, straight versus LGBTQ. It's the powers that be. It's the ruling class. It's the elites versus the rest of us. It's really not even Republican versus Democrat. And I'm talking about among regular people, right? Because as far as government goes, Republicans and Democrats work together to do what I'm talking about here. You've got influencers on the right and the left who are incentivized to divide you, to make you see your fellow Americans, everyday folks, as bad people or as evil, people who are trying to steal from you, people who are trying to harm you. there are incentives for them to do that. One, it gets a lot of clicks. I mean, people get a lot of clicks, they get a lot of clout, they get a lot of cash, especially on social media. But it also serves to distract us from the people who are really screwing us, right? I think everybody kind of knows this, at least in the back of their minds. But when we see this divisive stuff, whether it's DEI or another method of division, we quickly forget all that. We think, oh, well, this guy voted for Biden. He's my enemy. This guy voted for Trump. He's my enemy. No, that's not really true. And this is what we need to understand. The sooner we understand this, the better off we will be. Now, I'm not pretending like there are no problems as far as racism. I very much believe the opposite. I do think that racism is a problem. I hate racism no matter who is doing it and no matter who it is being directed against. I mean, we were seeing a lot of anti-Jewish bigotry over the past year or so after October 7th, 2023, with what's going on in Israel. We've been seeing a rise in that, and there's still racism against Black people. There's racism against white people, blah, 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 blah. The bottom line, though, is that most people don't engage in that, regardless of what their political affiliation is. Most people are just trying to make ends meet. We're all dealing with inflation and high grocery prices and education and worrying about crime and all that good stuff. But we don't really think of that when it comes to people who are not on our team or in our in group. That's the issue with DEI. And again, I'm not going to single out just DEI with this. DEI is one of many ways that the powers that be seek to divide us. And if we keep falling for the psyop, if we keep letting them do this, the government's going to get bigger, it's going to get more intrusive, and these elites that I'm talking about are going to continue to amass more power at our expense. So just to close out, I'm just going to ask a question. When are we going to stop falling for the psyop? Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Hit me up, give me your feedback. And until next time, stay free, stay principled, and most importantly, stay ungovernable.